Please welcome Myles Munroe Jr. and Steve Zakuani.
Steve gave a very interesting and inspirational talk. I think his story is very unique in that, for me at least, to achieve, to experience some setbacks early on in life, and then achieve some success, and then again some more setbacks. I think it shows the ups and downs of success, failures, your journey in pursuing your purpose, and the different paths that you're essentially placed on, and the people that you come into contact with that helps you along the way. I think you embody exactly what your topic said, you inspired me. And to be honest, you met my dad, and he was your mentor. And I remember you were in the Bahamas. This is when I first met you. Actually, my dad told me about you after he came off a trip. And he was like, "Oh, I met this soccer player," and he said that he was reading my books and listening to my teachings or whatever. And my dad meets a lot of people, all the time. So I was like, "Oh, okay, that's great. That's cool." And then you were home, and I remember you were at the house, and I came home, and he was like, the soccer player that I told you about some time ago, this is him, this is Steve. And I was like, "Hey, Steve, what's up, man? Nice to meet you," and whatnot. Still not really thinking, soccer player, okay, maybe not. And then I did my research. So I Googled Steve, and I found out, like, man, this guy was the #1 pick for MLS soccer. And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, he's a pretty big deal." And, I'm just so much in awe all the time of the reach that he had because of his message. He was able to inspire and mentor so many people from many walks of life, and including yourself. And just talk about, I guess, your beginnings. And I know, how difficult was it for you, as young as you were, to have the first injury? For them to say you probably won't walk again. Like, was it give a time period to where you had to really rebound from a mental standpoint to even want to think about walking again?
Yeah, so to give you guys a little bit more background, you probably can tell by my accent, I grew up in London, England, and the part I grew up is a city called Tottenham. And Tottenham's a very, very rough neighborhood. 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, there were some riots in London, and it began in Tottenham, in my city. So I grew up in a place where you don't make it out of that place. And the thing that saved me was at 9 years old, I signed for the youth team of one of the best soccer teams in the world. And so I was always traveling Andorra, Portugal, Spain, Brazil, wherever, just for tournaments as a young kid. So I always saw the world as a really big place. The negative side of that was, by the age of 12, I was so convinced I was going to play pro soccer, I stopped trying in school. For me, it made no sense whatsoever to do homework or this, I'm going to play pro. Like, it was a guarantee that at 16, that's when we finished school in England, I would sign my contract, you're going to go and make millions, that's going to be my life. So the motorcycle accident happened at 15, the year before the pro contract and the year before we leave school. So when I had it, and I knew I'm not going to walk, I'm definitely not going to play, and I had nothing to fall back on in school, it was like rock bottom. It was, looking back now, I understand just how close I came to messing up my life. So I had a motorcycle accident, had 2 surgeries, doc said you wouldn't walk. I did rehab for like 2 months, nothing was improving. I said there's no point here, and I pretty much just stayed home. There was a 2-year period where I was unemployed, uneducated, had no dreams, and was just at home every day. And if I wasn't home, I was hanging out in the streets with my friends, kind of trying to forget the pain of what I just messed up. So much soccer talent, and I just thrown it away. So mentally, I never allowed myself to suffer, because I just did other stuff. I partied and I went out, and I just kept my mind busy to not think about what I'd thrown away. And it took 2.5 years before I ever played or tried to play soccer again. So that 2-year period was like a blur for me. I did nothing for 2 years.
And did you, so you didn't do any soccer training at all? Man.
Nothing at all. I was just at home. I couldn't even watch soccer because to watch it was too painful. It was like, that should be me. And I had friends who I was better than, and they started signing contracts. And it was like, I really, really messed up. So I just avoided it, and I did all kinds of other stuff. I tried rapping for a little bit, and
it didn't work.
Too good.
Well, you said, everything you see is you already have. Everything that you need, you already have. Everything that you need to bring your purpose or your passion to life, you already have. So you knew that you had the talent within you. And I guess there's a period in time where you suffer some setbacks or some failures, and you may think that you're inadequate, or maybe what you saw isn't really what is supposed to be. Just talk about what that switch was that clicked to be like, this is, let me stop procrastinating and really get back to what I know that I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, so I briefly mentioned a Jamaican teacher. He was a teacher who, when I got to I will use American terms, my freshman year of high school, he was my PE teacher and the soccer team's coach. And he was the most popular teacher in school because he dressed like the students, he had braids like this, he spoke slang, he knew the latest hip hop. Like, we just related to the guy, the only teacher we liked, and he could play soccer as good as everybody else. So he had all of our respect. My third year in school, he left without warning, and we had no idea where he went, didn't tell anybody. He came back my fifth year after missing a year, and he changed, cut the braids off, wore his hair short, he wore shirt and tie, stopped teaching PE, started teaching maths, and we found it so weird. This guy who was like the cool teacher became like everybody else, and he began an after-school program where he handpicked 16 boys that were in danger of failing their final exams, and I was in that group. And he would mentor us every Wednesday at 3:30, supposed to be to 4:30, but we'd stay there till like 7 p.m. And he just gave life lessons. And I used to go there just to argue, because I was the kind of kid in school who always questioned teachers. And we always used to just argue with him. But when I left school and had my injury and everything, he's the only teacher that stayed in touch with me. And he had told me, and I briefly mentioned in my talk, hey, I've been attending this business seminar, you'd enjoy it, you'd get something out of it. And he said Sunday morning is the last day of the leadership seminar. And I didn't know what that was. And I went there, it was a church, didn't want to be there. And it's when I first heard Myles Munroe speak, and the book that he gave me was A Spirit of Leadership. And when I took it home and just began to read, and I hadn't read in years, like, just couldn't put the book down. And I began to read it. And then this was when YouTube was kind of just starting off. But I found everything I could on YouTube. And then he came back to London 2 months later, I went there. And for me, that switch began to happen then. Between Myles Munroe and Mr. Paul Goodison, these two mentors, I began to think that they overcame some crazy odds themselves, like I can still make it. And then I began training by myself. I began to train by myself. I would write goals all day. And the main one was I want to play pro soccer, but there were so many more that went with that. And I think it wasn't overnight. It was like a 6-month period where my mindset began to change. I began to believe that I was given a soccer talent for a reason, and I can't let it go to waste. So it kind of came from those two men, and back to back, just the interactions with them.
So obviously, hearing that you may not walk again, to the switch flipping in your head, and you saying, okay, I'm going to try this soccer thing again and really be dedicated and passionate about it. And usually when you have a vision or a desire, it's you who believe in yourself first, and everyone around you is like, I don't know, man, that was a pretty intense injury, or I don't think you're capable of doing whatever it is you're trying to do. So usually we have to be the ones to believe in ourselves first, and everyone else comes on board. So tell us about that process of, because you can't do it alone, but you need people that believe in you to take you on along the way. So how was that really? How long was it between the switch flipping for you and then others started to recognize, maybe could be possible of becoming professional again?
It took everyone a long time. So at 17, when I decided I'm going to play pro soccer, it was like I told my parents, my mom and my dad, both of them raised me, and they were kind of like, yeah, okay, like that. And then the friends around me, like, because I hadn't played in 2 years, could not believe that I was even considering doing this. No, we had no money growing up. And to this day, I wish I could go back and live in that time, because I went to tryouts in Italy, I went to the Netherlands, I went to Belgium, I was in Paris, and I have no idea how we got there. We would take trains and the bus, and we'd sleep. It just was crazy, just for a chance. And all the while, when I come back from every trip, and they're like, oh, you never made it again, it was like, you should stop now. And I kept going. My last hope was to come to America. And when I came to America, I was sleeping, I got a text, and it says, we have a scout from the University of Akron. He's coming to watch your friend Oscar, my friend Oscar, to play. Can you make up the numbers? Sure. I got my bag, went there, and the guy liked me more than Oscar.
Now, was that intentional? Did you go in there thinking, I'm going to have to outshine Oscar?
I just went just to make up. I was done at that point, make up the numbers. And he sat me down, he says, we're going to give you a full scholarship to play college soccer. No idea what college soccer was. And he goes, you're going to go to Ohio. No idea what Ohio was. And you're going to go to Akron. No idea what Akron was. But I was like, I accept, I'm going to come. Like, nothing's working here in Europe. I arrived in Ohio, never visited, got there. Like I said, my freshman year was still okay. People back home still didn't believe that I was going to go pro. Back then, in 2008, in Major League Soccer, only guys who were seniors were getting drafted. No underclassmen. I was the first one to be a sophomore and not only be drafted, but be drafted number one. And for my family, it wasn't until the agents started calling, and Adidas and Nike and Reebok and Puma, and everybody's throwing crazy money at you, and then everyone's like, all right, like
usually how it works.
So it took, honestly, man, for about 4 years, I was the only believer, I would say. And you know, where I lived in college, I lived with 3 guys on my team, and I was like the opposite of a college student, because in my room there was no TV, there was just a bookshelf I had, and I had quotes all over the wall from like my favorite books, and I just every day kept motivating myself. I didn't want to finish school. I knew that I want to go pro as soon as possible. Sophomores don't do it, but I'm going to do it, and end up doing it.
So that's crazy. I mean, you know, you got to think of going through an injury, the switch flipping in your head to wanting to pursue the dream that you've always had. No one believing in you for 4 years. So it's 4 years of you kind of training yourself and trying to convince everyone, and then, you know, look what happens. He's drafted number 1. He becomes this instant celebrity within his sport and within the industry that he was in. And then they started throwing a ton of money at him, and that's when people be like, oh, that's my friend, yeah, we've known him for years, you know. So even talk about that. Talk about managing, you know, the struggle that you went through, and folks may have seen or thought it was like an overnight thing, you know, where, wow, this kid came from nowhere, not knowing where you came from, or even the ones that did know, didn't really support you, but then they came around when, you know, all the lights and the cameras started to come around. How was that, managing that process?
Yeah, I mean, to become a success took, I think I'm still on the journey. It took such a long time, and so many mistakes and so many setbacks, but in some ways my life did change overnight. The day after I was drafted number 1, like I said, I really did have 400 Facebook friend requests. Like, it just came in. And then I'd walk in Seattle. Like, it took me a while to realize it. I'd be going to get breakfast or grocery shopping, and people would stop me in the street. And there's a picture been going by. There's a mural in Seattle that kids painted of me up on the wall. And it's like that. That's like people come to visit Seattle to see that. And I was still the same person. I was still the same kid that, you know, was trying to make it, but to everyone else was like, this guy's a star. So that was very difficult. My first year, my rookie year, I had a very hard time adjusting to that, because everybody wanted to be my friend. It was like, and everybody, cousins come out of nowhere on Facebook. This is serious. And, you know, everybody wanted me. I suddenly became the guy that everybody wanted to be around. And I would say about after a year, I got used to being, you know, having the fame in soccer, traveling, playing all over the world, and it kind of came back to myself and was like, I remember changing my phone number and just keeping the same people that I grew up with since I was like 10, 11 years old, and this is who I'm going to be friends with, that and my family. And that helped a lot, because I think people, when you're on the way up and you're struggling, nobody wants to be around. And the second they think you've made it, everybody wanted to be on the train. And for me, it was like, no, like there were some people who genuinely, whether I became an English teacher, I worked in safe, or whatever I did, would still be my friends. I'm going to be friends with those guys. That's why I decided.
So you've go ahead. It's a good place to clap. So you've attained all of this success and this celebrity, and you're being recognized now, just from walking on the street, drafted #1 in the league, and you're doing all of these great things now, and then your injury, in the league, playing at, I'm assuming, what you would call your best, and making good money doing it and whatnot, and then your injury happens, and I guess you lose total confidence and you were battling with your faith, because you achieve success, and you I guess you envision, or you see what you had envisioned years ago as a kid, and you're like, man, I finally made it, this is it, and you're thinking that I'm here to stay, and this is where I'm going to be for quite some time. And then, failure happens. Either you lose everything, or you get injured, or you go bankrupt, or whatever that, whatever your journey is, what happens on that journey. And you said something in your presentation where, man, if you have success and something happens, and your faith is questioned, or you battle with the faith, then everything that you have was just convenience, because it wasn't really rooted in the true essence of what your vision was. So just talk about, how was it, I guess, emotionally, and then dealing with, I'm assuming that you lost a lot of people once again. A lot of people gave up on you, didn't believe in you like you most definitely did. So losing that success, or losing the opportunity again to play, how was that dealing with, and especially battling with your faith?
Yeah. So after I got drafted, everything in my life came so quickly. It was like overnight. I remember being in college and going to my bank account ATM at $18, and it had to last me like 2 weeks. And it was, I remember being there like, it can't get no worse than this. And then the next month I got drafted, and then overnight, you got more money you ever seen in your life, and people want to be around you. Things happened so quickly for me. Our team was very successful. We sold out every week. We won championships. I was leading scorer. It was just happening so quick. I had people from Adidas flying in to meet me in my dorm room to show me concepts of shoes, and I'm just like, this is crazy. I never forget when I got to Seattle, because you don't get your first payment until the season starts, and we had like a month to go. And I told the guy from Adidas, like, I need an advance, like I can't make it. And they sent the check. I remember looking at this and being like, I couldn't believe it. And I slept with it under my pillow, and I kept checking, make sure it's still there. So, it's just true, I just couldn't believe it. So everything came so fast for me. And then at the point when I just about to get injured, you guys saw a picture up there. There's a reason I put David Beckham up there. So obviously he's a very famous person, but he's from England, like I'm from. And the LA Galaxy, his team, and my team, Seattle, used to be big rivals when we played. And I used to go against this guy every year, like against Bex, and we became friends through that. When I was having the height of my success, he's someone, because no one's as successful as him in our sport, I'd reach out to him on how to manage certain things. So I get injured at the point where I'm playing the best soccer of my life. I've been playing the sport for 21 years at that point, since I was a boy, and just playing unbelievable. Was one of the best players in the whole country, and I get this injury. And I end up getting thousands of letters and emails. The first one was from him. And it was so timely for me, the advice he gave me and everything. And everything he told me that would happen. The first thing I realized was, as quickly as they build you up, they're going to tear you down. The week after I got injured, my billboard, which was selling our season tickets, my picture, they replaced me with somebody else. It was like, you're injured, you can't do no good for us now, here's the next guy, the new guy in town. I was off all the marketing materials, and I've been hurt by that, being like, wow, like I've been doing so well, but it was a great lesson to learn that you can lose everything just like that, and you're only relevant to them if you can help them. And so I learned that people that were around me all the time stopped coming around again, because I wasn't playing, I wasn't on TV, I wasn't visible, and it was just me by myself in my house every day. I lived alone at the time, and I remember having so many times I wanted to just stop and retire. I'm like, I can just go and do something else. I can go and do that. And the hardest part of it was you question God. For me, it was like, I do everything right. I give all this money to charity. I tithe my money. Like, of all the people you could have picked, like, why you pick me? And that bothered me a lot. And it wasn't until I went to North Carolina and Dr. Myles laughed at the injury. And he had a way of kind of just, like, he just laughed like, this is nothing. And this is the hardest thing I faced in my life. And he's like, no. But then he told me, like, if this really does stop you, that's just convenience. Like, you were never in this thing for real. And that was the turning point. After that, I never struggled with faith issues again. I went twice as hard in my training. I was just like, I'm going to get back. Even if I don't get back, it's still okay. And the good thing was when I did get back, I played 3 more seasons. I then knew I was so good then at picking who can be around me, who can't be around me. Anytime they put me on a billboard or on a marketing campaign, took it with a grain of salt because it can be taken away. Before, when I did a Microsoft commercial in 2012, by the time I shot the commercial in LA, they uploaded it that night. I flew to Seattle the next day. I'd watched it like 200 times. I was like, kept watching it, like sending to people and just was so hyped by it. After that, I came back from the injury. Anything I did, it just was, I didn't even care because I knew the second I get injured again, the second I stop playing well, you move on to the next guy. So I learned some really good lessons from it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson for all of us in here. You know, when you attain a certain level of success, you're going to get gain notoriety and be a celebrity. But you should honestly take it with a grain of salt. And I say that to me, and like, just be humble in that position. Like, don't ever forget that it's a good place to be. It's good to be recognized and have a platform to influence. But it can all be taken away, so quickly. And that's one thing that my dad always taught me. Like, as much reach as he had and the influence that he had, he never took it for granted. He never took people for granted. He never blew off people just because they didn't have a certain position or a certain title or whatever. And that's one of the things with him doing that stuck with me, and even to this day, like, regardless of what I do as an individual or what we do as an organization, I'll take everything with a grain of salt, because I think I've been able to see, like, your life play out and my dad's life play out and so many others' lives play out, and you see the ups and downs of success and of life and the journey. And you just want to be conscious of, this is not going to last forever. And, you take as much as you can from it, but at the same time, you want to ensure that you're not putting yourself on a pedestal and thinking you're better than anyone else. And I think that's a very, very important lesson, man. So just my last question, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. You ended with saying that your best defense against setback is a clear vision. So now your career is finished, and you've moved on to a number of other things. You started a foundation, and you do a lot of charity work with kids, and still in the arena of soccer. So just discuss, life after professional soccer.
Yeah. So at the end of the 2014 season, MLS, Major League Soccer, our season runs from training camp in January, regular season in March, and then you finish playoffs in November. We only get December off pretty much. So towards the end of the 2014 season, I began to think about retiring. And I'd spoken to my family, the people around me, and I'd sent even Dr. Myles an email, but he was like, I'm getting ready to go to Africa. I got a ton of work to do here. We'll talk when I'm back. And so I just kept thinking, do I want to retire? What am I going to do? And even though I had ideas, maybe I can speak, maybe I can write a book about my story. I just wasn't clear until I spoke to him. I'm like, I have to speak with him and just get that final bit of advice. And he called me when he came back. And we never really spoke on the phone that much. He wasn't much of a texter. We kind of emails, but on this day we spoke for like 45 minutes. And his advice to me was, tell me all the pros and cons if you keep playing. Tell me all the pros and cons if you retire. And just through conversation, it became so clear that I was ready to retire. And then he was like, your heart's set on it, go and do it. He told me certain things I should do. I did those things. The first thing I did was I wrote a book about my story. He said, just get it out there. I did that. That book ended up...
What's the name of the book?
It's called 500 Days. And it was the length from the injury to the game I came back was exactly 500 days. And no publisher, I just did it myself, paid for everything, just wanted to get out there quickly. And a guy in Seattle, Microsoft, Expedia, Boeing, Starbucks, Amazon, they're all from Seattle, they're based in Seattle. So you get to meet all these people. So I knew a guy kind of high up in Amazon. I gave him my book, said, can you just read it? And he loved it. And he ended up spreading that word, and Amazon came on as a partner, and that book went #1 on Amazon. And through that, I started getting all these speaking invites, and it happened very quickly. And then my foundation, which gives out scholarships in education and in soccer to kids all over the world, began to grow as well. And my team that I retired from asked me to join the TV broadcast. So when the guys play, I'm the guy on TV announcing, calling the game. So I began to do these 3 things, and there was so much going on. About 8 months into it, I began to get burned out. So I said, I need to stop and figure out what I really, really want to do. Let me go back to being 17, hearing Dr. Myles for the first time. What's the vision I really had? And it simplified it for me, where my vision was to use the platform of soccer to change the world. And what does change look like to me? And I said, I got to speak. I never saw a guy who could speak like Dr. Myles. I spoke for 20 minutes. Dr. Myles would speak for like 3 hours sometimes.
I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he did it.
And he wouldn't be done. And then you leave the meeting, go to dinner, and he would talk more at dinner.
Talk for another 3 hours, yes.
And then you're just like, come on, man. So, but what he did with words, I was like, he gave me so much I have to give to people that in parts of the world that he was not able to have gone to. So that's the main thing I'm doing. I travel doing that. I run my foundation. I travel doing a lot of speaking now, and it pretty much just is everything I've learned on my journey. And it's been great. It's been really, really great. Long-term wise, my dream is to continue to build up my foundation. I'm in Seattle right now. My goal is to move back to my hometown in London. And the same help I received from Mr. Paul Goodison, from Dr. Myles and other mentors, to be that for the kids where I grew up.
That's awesome, man. Let's give Steve a hand for that. So we're opening up for questions from the audience. Anybody have a question for Steve? Mm-hmm. 2 questions. Say your name.
My name is Rashad from Bahamas. My first question would be, you mentioned that when you end up going to church that day, using your phone, what did Dr. Myles say to cause you to be interested? And the second question would be, even the mental fatigue or toughness, when you have to face the same team, the same person that break your leg,
Great question.
how did that go, and even what happened with the game? Who won?
Good question. Okay. So the first question, what did Dr. Myles say? It's so profound. I remember the date and the time, June 12, 2005, 10 a.m. This just was so profound for me. It was at a church called Trinity Chapel, a Nigerian church in the east side of London, a place called Stratford. I went there, Nigerian church, they were doing crazy praise and worship, all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to be here. And he gets up, and if you've heard him speak, you might have heard him share this story. He told a story about a lion and a sheep. And I'm sitting there like, this is insane. This is like my life. Like, this man knows me. And it was just like, and he was going. Then he began to just, it wasn't even, knowing him later in years, it was just him just giving the basics of what he knew. But at the time, for me, it was like the best thing I ever heard. He spoke more about mindset, mentality, where you're from, being like everybody else, but having the guts to stand up and go after things. And it just spoke so much to me. And I remember it was him, wife and daughter, you weren't there, and I was first in line to get the book. I remember shaking his hand and holding on a little bit, looking in his eyes, and I wrote this in my book. I saw what I can only describe as peace. And I said, I just want what this man has. And I didn't believe in no God or nothing at the time. I said, I just want what this man has. And I left there, and I couldn't get it out of my head. So that was what he spoke to me on that day. In terms of the second question, the injury. So the guy that injured me got the longest suspension in Major League Soccer, the biggest fine of all time, and they had to retrain the referees on how to manage it, because the injury was the biggest one we've seen in our league. And the whole media wanted me to be angry at him. And I said I didn't do any press for 3 months. When I did my first interview with ESPN, I'd said, I've forgiven the guy. And it didn't come from a place of, I'm such a great person. I knew that if I want to come back onto the field, I have to use all my energy to my comeback. because the chances are already that slim. I can't divert any attention elsewhere. And I kept saying, I've forgiven him, and nobody believed me. And then when we got, suddenly I became healthy right when his team was coming to town, the only weekend that national TV cameras are going to be there, and I knew right away God was setting the whole thing up. Because he's going to get me a chance to go face-to-face with this guy who I claim to have forgiven, face-to-face. My mom, my sisters, my brother, everybody wanted a piece of this guy. And I kept telling them, chill, it's okay, I want to be good. And then I came onto the field, played only 5 minutes. We won the game 2-1. After the game, the cameras normally follow the goal scorers or the man of the match, the player of the game, the MVP. I had like 5 touches of the ball, and they came to follow me because they knew it's my first game back in 500 days. And I went straight to the guy. And in soccer, we're the only sport who do this. We exchange jerseys after a game. You normally do it with your friends on the other team or guys you look up to. So the first time I played against David Beckham, I went straight for his jersey. Like me and 10 other people, like we wanted that jersey. But I went to find the guy, and I hugged him. And the picture went viral everywhere. And I whispered in his ear, let's change jerseys. I forgive you. And he broke down in my arms. Gave my shirt to him, gave me his shirt, and I walked away. And that image, I remember being the reason why a lot of like pastors and teachers and parents reached out to me, just saying like, that is one of the most iconic sporting moments I've seen in my life. Just knowing the journey you came on, we would have forgiven you if you'd have been upset at him. We'd understand. But to do that took a lot more strength and was a great example.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Any other questions? Anybody? I'll take one more.
One quick question. My name is Ralph Clare from the Bahamas. Can you talk a little bit about the friend selection process that you've kind of went through over the years? You talked about, having a group of friends that, you guys were a bunch of thieves and stuff, and you stole bikes and did all kinds of, and then you have a group of friends that kind of build you up. Can you kind of walk us through kind of that thought process where you learn, probably don't need to spend too much time with these dudes, and I think I know what a good friend, a colleague looks like. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, great point. So where I grew up and, looking back now, yeah, the people were doing bad things and into drugs or whatever, but when you're growing up, that's just my friends. Like, that's just Brad from down the street. Like, I don't think Brad's a bad person. So when I even became a professional soccer player, those same guys were still doing the things they were doing, and I realized then that if I associate with that, it could affect what I'm doing over here. I'll tell you who I learned from that, how to pick friends. I went to college in a place called Akron, Ohio. Akron is the hometown of LeBron James. Very low income area. LeBron's high school team was called the Fab Five because from that low income era, they beat every team and won the national title. 2 of his high school teammates played at my college basketball while I was playing soccer. One of those guys, Romeo Travis, became a really good friend of mine. And he's still friends with LeBron to this day. When LeBron got to the NBA, the same friends he grew up with, one became his agent, one became his manager, one became security. He took them off the streets, trained them for 2 years, then fired all these corporate agents and put his boys and made them millionaires, pretty much. And I remember thinking that. So in my foundation, the director, I've known him since he was 10. The person who manages all of our events and planning, that's my sister. So I learned from him to have the people who've been with you from the beginning, if you put them in certain different environments, they already have all the talents and the gifts. They already have it there. And I remember thinking the most powerful athlete in America just has his childhood friends managing his career, and they've done a great job. So I took a cue from that. Now, there's some guys I gave that to who messed it up. They want to change, and that was the sign right there. I can't associate with this anymore. But I didn't want to be the guy who just wrote them off because I made it. I wanted them to come along and give them a chance. Like, what is he good at? Oh, this guy's really good at planning. You be my planner. This guy, like when I would travel certain places in Seattle, it's crazy with fans after games. If I want to have dinner with my family or so, I'd have my uncle, my big uncle, just be my security, for example. And we pay him a little bit under the table. But that's my uncle. But it's just... But he was in and out of jail when I was growing up. But now he's, he lives up in Seattle by me. He's around me all the time. It's like just giving him opportunity. People, it's amazing how they transform when they're placed in a different environment.
That's good, man. So choose your friends wisely. This is most important. Well, Steve, thanks, man. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, man.
Thanks for this talk, man. You've said a lot. You've inspired me, and I hope that we can continue this relationship moving forward, man. So appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
Thank you, man.